She didn't even bother looking up at me when those words left her mouth, telling me to stop pressuring her and that she just wasn't in the mood. All I had done was ask if she wanted to grab some dinner. We were standing right there in the studio kitchen late in the evening, a good hour after everyone else had already packed up and gone home for the night. I wasn't looking for anything extra, just a simple meal, but she couldn't even turn her head to face me. Without saying a word, I just tossed my keys onto the counter and started heading for the exit, which is right when her whole tone completely flipped. Suddenly she's asking where the hell I'm going. So I stop right in my tracks and look back at her. She was actually staring at me now, still clutching her phone, but the expression on her face had completely changed to something like confusion or maybe even a little bit of panic. I kept it down to a single word and just told her, "Home." She blinked, totally thrown off, and asked me what I meant by that, but I didn't give her an answer. I just walked right out the door, and even though she called out my name, I was already moving down the stairwell. I didn't go back to our shared apartment that night, and honestly, I was turning my back on everything we had built together over the years. The reason was pretty simple. 3 months before this, I caught a notification on her laptop when she left it wide open on the couch right next to me. It wasn't from some random stranger either, it was from my own business partner, the guy I built this entire company with from the ground up, a guy who actually stood by us at our wedding. This was a guy who was in our lives every single day and knew every little detail about us. And his message straight up said, "Can't stop thinking about last night." I didn't blow up at her right then, I didn't ask a million questions, and I didn't throw a tantrum because I knew I needed time to plan, not a bunch of cheap answers. I just started making moves immediately. I didn't sleep a wink that night. Instead, I sat in the living room with the door shut tight, listening to her steady breathing coming from the bedroom down the hall while I worked on my laptop. I went through every single folder, shared drive, and backup we had accumulated since launching the studio 4 years back. I wasn't hunting for more evidence of the affair because I already had all the proof I'd ever need. I was looking for financial records, client contracts, and partnership agreements that I could use as leverage. By the time the sun came up, I had a solid list of 3 different investors who had reached out to us over the past year, people we originally turned down because we wanted to keep the business small and strictly ours. Before she even opened her eyes that morning, I fired off an email to the first investor on the list, letting them know I was ready to talk about their old offer again. She walked into the kitchen around 8 a.m. with her hair pulled back and a coffee mug in her hand, sticking to the exact same morning routine we'd shared for years. She made a comment about me being up early, so I just nodded, shut my laptop, and told her I had a quick call with a client. She gave me a smile, kissed the top of my head as she walked past, and acted like absolutely nothing was wrong. But the reality was that everything had changed. For the next 8 weeks, I just watched her play her game. Not in a crazy or desperate way, but I just started paying real close attention to the details. I noticed how she laughed just a little bit too hard at his jokes during our team meetings, how she'd quickly glance at her phone and shove it in her pocket the second I walked into a room, and how she suddenly started staying late on the exact same nights he was in the back room editing solo. I never brought it up, choosing to keep making my phone calls instead, and by the time 2 months rolled around, I had a formal, written contract sitting right on my desk. It was from an investment fund based out of Boston that wanted to buy up 40% of the company, take complete control over our daily operations, and implement a brand new management structure. I told them I'd think it over, and then I went ahead and set up a meeting with my partners, just the 3 of us, under the pretense of discussing how we were going to scale the business. The meeting went down on a Thursday afternoon, and I came prepared with printed handouts covering our revenue projections, market analysis, and a full proposal to bring in outside capital. He immediately shot it down, arguing that we didn't need investors because we were doing just fine, asking why we should fix something that wasn't broken. I looked right at him and said that fine just wasn't cutting it anymore and that we were leaving serious money on the table, and then I slid that Boston offer right across the desk to them. I explained the whole deal, the 40% stake, the total operational control, and the new management team. He picked up the paperwork, and I could see his jaw tighten up instantly. She just sat there completely silent, watching me, but then her hand moved across the table for a split second and touched his wrist. I caught it instantly, and even though she yanked her hand back fast, the damage was done because I'd already seen it. She asked me why I hadn't come to them about this first and wanted to know what I was really pulling here. I told her flat out that I was telling them right now, explaining that they could both stay on to run the creative side while I stepped back from operations completely, meaning everyone would keep their exact same titles, salaries, and daily work. He stood up, walked over to the window, and muttered that he needed some time to think it over, so I told him he had exactly 2 weeks before I moved forward with the deal anyway. She just stared at me like I had transformed into a complete stranger right in front of her eyes, but I just gathered up my papers, told them the terms weren't up for negotiation, and walked out. That night, she stayed at the studio until past midnight, which I know because I was tracking the security logs from home. She finally walked back into the apartment around 1 a.m., didn't say a single word to me, and went straight into the bedroom, slamming the door shut behind her. The very next morning, he called an emergency meeting with the entire staff and deliberately left me off the invite list. Around noon, I got a text from one of our junior editors letting me know the whole team was gathered in the conference room and that he was telling everyone I was trying to sell the studio behind their backs because I didn't care about what we'd all built together. I just let that text sit there and didn't bother replying. She finally got home that evening around 7 p.m., dropped her bag right by the front door, and stood there in the hallway for a long, heavy moment before she finally walked inside to where I was sitting on the couch. My laptop was already shut, and she came over and took a seat on the very edge of the opposite side of the couch, making sure there was plenty of distance between us so we weren't even brushing shoulders. She started right in, telling me how completely bent out of shape everyone down at the studio was, how I totally blindsided the whole team, and that this just wasn't the way we were supposed to handle major business decisions. I looked at her and asked flat out if those were her own words or just the script he'd handed her to read to me. You could see the shift in her face instantly. She dropped his name real slow and asked me what the hell I was even implying. Right then, I told her straight up that I'd seen the message on her laptop a full 3 months ago. She froze completely, turning to absolute stone for a second before she tried to brush it off, claiming it was nothing and that I was completely blowing things out of proportion. She insisted they were just talking about some work project, so I asked her exactly what kind of project keeps a guy up at night thinking about what they did yesterday. She didn't have an answer for that one. I just got up, walked over to the kitchen, and poured myself a glass of water. My hands weren't shaking at all, completely steady on the outside, but inside my chest, it felt like a silent, slow-motion collapse. She followed me into the kitchen, arguing that we couldn't just leave it at that and that we actually needed to talk, claiming I couldn't just throw out heavy accusations and walk away. I set my glass down on the counter and told her I wasn't accusing her of a damn thing. I was just stating a hard fact. When she demanded to know what fact I was talking about, I looked her dead in the eye and told her it was the fact that she'd been lying straight to my face for months. Her eyes welled up right then, but she held the tears back, just standing there staring at me, before she finally announced she was heading back to the studio because she needed some serious space to clear her head. It was already pushing 8 p.m. I asked her point blank if he was going to be down there with her, but she didn't say a word, just grabbed her keys and bolted out the door. I gave it about 30 minutes to let the dust settle, and then I pulled up the security app on my phone to check the live feeds from the studio cameras. Sure enough, there were 2 people hanging out in the back editing suite with the door shut tight and the lights dimmed way down. I sat there watching the screen for about 5 minutes before I shut the app down completely and dialed my lawyer's number. She never made it home that night, instead sending me a text around midnight claiming she was crashing at a friend's place because she needed time to think things through. I didn't even bother text back to ask which friend she was talking about. The next morning, I was sitting in my lawyer's office with everything laid out on the table, the text message, the studio security logs, and all the corresponding timestamps. He asked me right then and there if I wanted to pull the trigger and file for divorce, but I told him to hold off on that part because I wanted to lock down this business deal first. Later that afternoon, I fired off a formal email to her, to him, and to our company attorney, officially notifying them that I was exercising my right to cash out and sell my shares. The Boston Fund was ready to roll, and we were on track to sign the paperwork by the end of the week. My phone started ringing just 20 minutes later with her name on the screen, but I just let it buzz. She tried 3 more times back to back, and on the 4th call I finally picked up. She was completely sobbing on the other end, telling me I was tearing everything we built to pieces, begging me to just talk to her so we could fix it. I cut through the noise and asked her straight up if she'd slept with him. Total silence on the line. Then she started stammering, saying it wasn't what it looked like, that it just sort of happened, and she never intended for things to go that far. I asked her exactly when this whole thing started. There was a massive pause on the phone before she finally confessed it had been going on for about 5 months, starting right after the wrap party for that big Nike campaign we did. She claimed they'd both had way too much to drink, that it was a huge mistake, and that it only happened a handful of times after that night. Just a few times, apparently. I told her flat out that the paperwork was going to be ready this Friday and she could either sign it or not, but either way I was officially walking away from the company. She started begging me not to do this, but I just hung up on her. 2 hours later, there's a heavy pounding on my apartment door, and the guy just wouldn't stop knocking until I finally opened it. He was standing there telling me we needed to have a man-to-man chat, but I blocked the entryway and didn't invite him inside. He started telling me I was being completely irrational, letting my emotions destroy a good thing, and that we could easily smooth this over if I just calmed down for a second. I looked right at him and asked if sleeping with my wife was his idea of smoothing things over. His face turned bright red, and he started scrambling, saying it wasn't what I thought, that feelings just got complicated, and he never wanted to hurt me. I told him I didn't give a damn about any of that, and then I slammed the door right in his face. He stood out there in the hallway for another minute. I could literally hear him breathing through the door, before I finally heard his footsteps fading away down the hall. Friday morning came around, and I signed the papers, officially selling my 40% stake to that investment fund out of Boston. I walked away with a check big enough to keep me set up for years. She tried her best to throw a wrench in the gears, calling up the lawyers and claiming I was acting purely out of spite to sabotage the business we'd built together from scratch. But the original partnership agreement we signed years ago was airtight. I had every legal right to sell my piece of the pie, and it took 2 signatures to put a stop to it, and I held one of them. By Monday morning, the new management team from Boston had already moved into the building, and they didn't waste a single second. They completely restructured the daily operations, flipped the workflows upside down, and brought in their very own production coordinator to run the show. These new bosses started making massive operational changes without bothering to consult a single soul in the building. He actually ended up calling me on a Tuesday night, completely losing it and claiming I'd ruined everything, that the studio was falling apart, and that it wasn't even the same company we had built together anymore. I didn't hold back. I told him flat out that the place stopped being ours the exact second he decided to lay his hands on my wife, and then I blocked his number right then and there. She packed up and moved her stuff out the very next week, deliberately timing it for when I was out at the gym. She took all of her clothes, her books, and even those art prints we'd picked out together during our anniversary trip, but she left everything else behind. Walking back into the apartment after that, the whole place just felt completely hollow. Her set of keys was sitting right there on the kitchen counter without a note or anything. I just picked them up, tossed them into a drawer, and shut it. Later that evening, I got another text from that same junior editor, letting me know that 2 more people had already walked out. He said the corporate suits didn't have a clue how our creative process worked, the whole vibe had gone totally cold, and he was planning on turning in his resignation too. I just stared at the screen for a minute before setting my phone down on the table. A week after that, word got back to me that she'd officially moved in with him, renting a tiny, temporary apartment over in the Arts District while they tried to figure out their next move. The Boston investors actually reached out to me once, asking if I'd be willing to come back on a consulting basis to handle a few legacy projects for clients who were specifically demanding my involvement. I told them no. They came back and offered to double my old rate, but I turned them down a second time. 6 weeks went by like that, and I completely cut myself off from anything and everything to do with the studio. No checking their socials, no asking mutual friends how things were going, nothing. Then, out of nowhere one afternoon, my phone rings from an unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but some gut instinct made me pick it up, and sure enough, it was him. His voice sounded completely beaten down and exhausted. He told me he desperately needed to talk to me about something incredibly important, and he quickly added that it wasn't about her. I asked him what the hell it could possibly be about then, and that's when he dropped the bomb. The studio was completely going under. The investors were pulling the plug after losing a massive client contract, the profit margins were completely busted, and they were shutting down the entire operation to liquidate the equipment. The guy had lost absolutely everything. I asked him why he was calling me to tell me this, and he straight up said it was because I was the only person alive who knew how to fix the mess. I just hung up on him. He tried calling back instantly, but I hit decline and blocked that number too, though the damage was already done because now the truth was out there. The studio was dead. 4 years of hard work, our stellar reputation, the client relationships, and the incredible team we assembled were all vanishing into thin air, just because the new owners only cared about spreadsheets and numbers. I kept trying to tell myself it wasn't my problem anymore since I'd walked away with a massive pile of cash, my complete freedom, and 0 strings attached to that place. But when night came, I couldn't sleep a wink. My mind kept racing back to that junior editor and all the freelancers who counted on us for steady work, not to mention the loyal clients who trusted us because we actually gave a damn about the craft. By the time the sun came up, I'd made my decision. I called up my lawyer and asked what it would take to buy the whole operation back. He told me the investors were desperate to cut their losses and would jump at pretty much any reasonable offer just to wash their hands of it. I threw out an incredibly lowball offer, way lower than what they'd paid me for my shares, and they accepted it within 48 hours. I signed the paperwork, transferred the funds, and suddenly found myself as the sole owner of whatever was left of the company. 3 weeks later, the studio reopened its doors, and I fired off emails to all our old clients letting them know we were under new management and heading back to our original roots, which brought most of them right back to us. I rehired the staff members who had been let go, brought that junior editor back onto the payroll, and completely rebuilt our old production workflows from scratch. But I made sure there was absolutely no place for him, and there sure as hell wasn't a place for her. About a month after we reopened, I got a single email from her saying she'd heard I bought the place back, asking if there was any room for her to come back to work, because she really missed the team and the projects. She didn't say a single word about missing me. I read through that email 3 times, and then I hit delete. 2 months down the road, a massive production company out of New York reached out to me regarding a major campaign with a 6-figure budget, wanting to fly me out to pitch my vision. I booked the ticket, and the meeting went incredibly well. They loved my creative approach and told me they'd been tracking our studio's work for years. On my way back to the hotel after the pitch, I happened to glance through the window of a local coffee shop and saw a couple sitting inside. She was laughing up a storm, and he was leaning across the table with their hands almost touching, looking like the picture of perfect happiness. I just kept on walking. That night, sitting alone in my hotel room staring at my phone, I remembered her email was still sitting in my trash folder, the one asking for her old job back. I knew I could easily restore it, type out a reply, and open that door again. My finger hovered over the glass for a long moment, but instead, I just closed out the mail app and pulled up my calendar to log the follow-up notes and pitch revisions for the New York team. The next morning, I caught my flight back home, and the second I landed, I noticed a voicemail from him. I have no clue how the guy even managed to track down my new number. He mentioned he was packing his bags to move out to Portland to start his life over from scratch, and he wanted to offer a real apology before he left town. I deleted the message before it even finished playing. That weekend, I went down to the studio early on a Saturday morning when the building was completely empty, leaving just me and the production gear. I took a slow walk through the entire space, past the editing bays, through the conference room where we used to brainstorm our biggest campaigns, and right into the kitchen where I'd asked her about getting dinner on that fateful night. Everything looked exactly the same on the surface, but the feeling was entirely different. I sat down at my desk, flipped open my laptop, and started grinding away on the revisions for the New York project until it was pitch black outside. When I finally left, I locked up the building, drove back to my place, cooked some dinner, and ate it completely by myself. It was incredibly quiet, but it was completely mine. For months after that, I'd occasionally cross paths with her at a coffee shop just a couple of blocks away from our old apartment. One time, I was standing there waiting to pick up my order, and she was sitting right by the window. Our eyes locked instantly. She looked completely different, thinner, with her hair chopped short, and this profound exhaustion written all over her face. She stood up and started walking right toward me, so I just grabbed my coffee cup and bolted for the exit. She called out my name, causing me to stop right in my tracks, though I didn't turn around to face her. She pleaded with me, saying she just wanted to talk for 5 minutes. I finally turned around and told her flat out that there was absolutely nothing left for us to talk about. She started pouring her heart out, saying how incredibly sorry she was, that she'd made a catastrophic mistake, and that she thinks about it every single day. I asked her if he was still in the picture, but she just shook her head, confessing the whole relationship fell apart the second he lost his stake in the studio, that it was never real to begin with, and she had no idea what she'd been thinking. I just gave her a slow nod, told her I genuinely hoped she figured her life out, and walked right out the door. She didn't try to follow me. I got into my car and just sat there for a second with my hands gripping the steering wheel. Right when my phone buzzed with a text from the New York crew letting me know the contract was officially finalized and they wanted to kick things off next month. I typed back a quick reply telling them I was ready to roll, turned the key in the ignition, and drove straight back to work. The studio is a totally different beast these days. Same physical space and equipment, sure, but the underlying energy has completely shifted. I brought on a brand new creative director who has absolutely zero history or personal complications tied to my past. The work we're putting out is incredible, honestly better than anything we did before, but I don't stay late anymore because I refuse to ever blur the lines between my business and my personal life again. The second the workday wraps up, I pack my bags and head out. Every now and then, I'll drive right past that building in the Arts District where she used to live with him, but I never slow down the car. I just keep moving forward. My phone rings off the hook these days with new clients and even bigger marketing campaigns, and the studio is expanding faster than ever. Back at the apartment, everything remains completely peaceful. There's no one else's belongings cluttering up my space, and no unexpected noises in the dark. I don't miss the drama at all. Sometimes, late at night, my mind wanders back to that notification I read on her screen. Can't stop thinking about last night, and I think about that final evening in the studio kitchen when she asked me where the hell I was going, and I told her, home. I haven't spoken a single word to her since that day in the coffee shop. The studio is thriving, and honestly, I'm doing just fine myself. I made myself dinner tonight, sat down at the table, and just took my time eating. Outside the window, the city was alive with movement. People going about their business, everyone carrying their own hidden baggage. I finished up my meal, washed the dishes, and flipped off the kitchen light. No more lies, no more whispers, and no more hidden messages popping up on someone else's screen. Just me and the exact life I chose for myself. Thanks for hanging out and sticking with me until the very end of this journey. What's your honest take on how this whole story went down? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because I've got plenty more true, hidden stories coming your way real soon.